Okay. Yeah, we do record all of our meetings and share them on YouTube. So if anyone misses any part of it, you can always check it out later. And let's start off by, if everyone could, you know what, we have a small enough group. If everyone's comfortable unmuting themselves and briefly introducing just your name, affiliation, and what brought you in today, just like a brief sentence. So, and awesome, if you can turn on your camera, that's great. You know, this network started as a way to network, and that's been very difficult virtually. So I appreciate you all showing up. And yeah, if you could have a moment of FaceTime, I think that'd be great. I'll kick it off. My name is Mary McDonald. I'm the Forest Conservation Coordinator at Circle and the facilitator of the Yuba Forest Network. And I'm here today, not only because it's my job, but I genuinely enjoy working with all of you and learning about the different projects and finding ways to collaborate meaningfully. And I'm just gonna call on names to keep things relatively quick. So Matthew, iPhone, you're the first person I see. And you're muted.
I thought I took it off. Okay, Matthew Moore, Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the United Auburn Indian Community.
Awesome, thanks for being here. Anything, I know, well, you're presenting today, so any other reason you've attended?
Well, yeah, I mean, you all reached out to us as a tribe under consultation, and you know that's oftentimes how we get engaged with a lot of things that we do. So that's why I'm here. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. All right, Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Allen. I'm the Tribal Historic Preservation Director working with Matt at Auburn. And as Matt noted, we often do this under consultation, but what is making us so pleased about this group is that it's a chance to be proactive about many of the policies and the approaches that we have. So we're very glad to be here, and thank you for including us.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, Aaron.
Aaron Zettler-Mann. I'm also with Circle. I'm the Watershed Science Director here, and I am here to continue to learn and be involved in all of the forest conservation and resiliency work that Circle is involved in.
Thanks, Aaron. All right, I'm gonna throw it to Lon.
Good morning, Lon Henderson. I'm the district ranger in the Yuba district on the Tahoe National Forest. And as always, I just like trying to stay up to date with what other organizations are doing in the area. It's all, you know, we're all in this together. So thank you.
Thank you, Lon. Allison.
Hi, everyone. Allison Thompson. I am Executive Director at the Yuba Watershed Protection and Fire Safe Council. And also, I guess, kind of part-time, still working with Camptonville Community Partnership on their biomass facility. So lots of hats here. I'm here today for probably a lot of reasons, partly because I helped start this group, gosh, a long time ago, well over a year ago, and worked with Mary on it. So it's great to be here and support, but also I think we have some really valuable conversations here that we don't necessarily get anywhere else, and we should. So yeah, really happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Allison. Sherilyn.
Hi, so I'm Sherilyn with the United Auburn Indian Community as a staff member in the Preservation Department, and I am also presenting today, but I just really enjoy coming to the quarterly meetings to hear what everybody else is going on in the area and just to get to know folks.
Thank you. How about Paul?
Morning, Mary. Good morning, everybody. I'm Paul Cummings from Nevada County OES. I'm the County Emergency Manager. I work with Jen Tamo, who will be presenting today. And a lot of what we do is try to protect the community from the greatest threat that we face, which is wildfire. And a lot of you are doing incredible work around mitigating that threat. And so we want to be a part of that and do what we can to to leverage county efforts and sync up in reducing that shared threat. So happy to be here, excited to hear the presentations today.
Awesome. Okay, Chris Friedel.
Hi, I'm Chris Friedel, the Executive Director of the Yuba Watershed Institute. And yeah, I come to these meetings because there's always really great networking. And at least for me personally, there's been a lot of great connections and potential projects that got launched just from the networking that I've done in this group. So I think it's really important because there's so many people doing so many things and we all need to know what's happening.
Great, totally. And Chris Dallas.
Hi, I'm Chris Dallas with the Sierra Nevada Conservancy. I'm the Central Subregion Area Representative. So I work in the Nevada, Placer, El Dorado, Yuba County areas. And this is an opportunity to keep track on what's going on in the region and also start spotting opportunities to help develop projects with partners.
Awesome. Thank you. Jeff?
Hello, Jeff Lauder, Executive Director of Sierra Streams Institute. And yeah, coming to these meetings because even before transitioning into ED role, come from a forest ecology background, and our organization does a lot of work working with the community in terms of community science and education, and really just trying to look at how, like we're all here for, so much forest work seems to be end at the boundaries of your projects, and looking for opportunities to have that work extend beyond those boundaries and kind of across the whole landscape. So really looking to continue to be part of those conversations.
Thanks, Jeff. And for anyone just joining us, we're just doing really brief introductions. Since we have a small group, we're just taking this moment to say hi and where we're from, our affiliation, and why we're here today. So now I'm going to throw it to Julie.
Hi, I'm Julie Fair. I'm the Director for Headwaters Conservation for California for American Rivers. We're a national organization, but we have an office in Nevada City, so we're local and come to these meetings to find out what other folks are doing and learn from that for our projects.
Great. Carrie?
Sorry, slow to unmute. Hi, everybody. I'm Carrie Rinney, and I'm an independent consultant working on grant writing and project development and technical assistance. And here at this meeting to track the conversation and participate mostly for the Yuba Water Agency because they do a lot of forest work in partnership with Circle and others on this call, and are just interested in keeping a finger on the pulse of what's happening.
Awesome. And Dawn?
Yeah, hold on a second.
Sure.
Organize here. Yeah, I'm Don Ravines. I'm with Sierra Forest Legacy. I'm on the advisory board for Sierra Forest Legacy, and I'm also chair of the Nevada County Climate Action Now Committee, working on the forestry and other issues.
Great. And Amy?
Hi, this is, can you guys hear me? I have my headphones on.
Yeah, sound good.
Okay. I'm Amy Kennedy with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm a senior environmental scientist in the Timberland Conservation Program. I'm actually listening in on the meeting for Sarah Loos. She's our OES coordinator, but also I cover emergencies and exemptions and fuel reduction projects for Yuba and Sutter County. So it's good for me to listen in.
We're happy you're here, Amy. Thanks. And
Thanks.
Brandon Johnson.
Yeah, hey, good morning, everybody. Brandon Johnson. I'm a soil conservationist with the National Resources Conservation Service in Yuba City. We cover Yuba and Sutter County. Just here to listen to what great work you guys have going on and pass the information along to if I encounter anybody who is in need of what you guys are doing. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. How about Jason Landers?
Morning, all. My name is Jason Landers. I'm the Land Stewardship Associate with Bear Yuba Land Trust, and I'm here to network with folks and stay updated on what's happening in our area. Thank you for having me.
Great. Eric?
Yeah, I assume that's me. Sorry, my camera's not working, but Eric Sweet with Sierra Pacific Industries, the Tahoe District Manager, and we participate here, or I do, making sure that we're coordinated with everything that's going on in the watershed, and making sure we lend a hand where we can, and we're a large landowner throughout the Yuba, and we're trying to have it sustain and not get burned up in a large fire. So I think all the work we're doing here is really good.
Thanks for representing today, Eric. I appreciate that. Jen.
Hi all, my name is Jen and I'm an analyst in the Office of Emergency Services. I'm having a similar issue as Eric. My camera for some reason is not functioning today, but I'm just really excited to be joining you all today. I'll be presenting a little bit about how we're doing work in the community to build resiliency and really looking to identify opportunities to coordinate and collaborate moving forward. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe the last person we have is Kat. Okay, so Kat's, yeah, I kind of knew maybe that her microphone's not working, but I'll read out her chat to everyone. Kat Perlman's is our new Forest Conservation Coordinator Program Manager at Circle. This is her first week, so go easy on her. she's learning a lot, but we're thrilled to have her, and she says, I'm thrilled we get started and connected with YFN. So yeah, she's great. She's coming to us from working on the Tahoe National Forest, so she knows this area, and she's got a great background. Well, thank you all. Did I miss anyone? I don't think so. Well, thank you for bearing with me with that. I appreciate taking a few more moments to get to know each other a little bit better. So our agenda today, we're going to start off with a few announcements, and then we have an awesome panel of speakers from 4 different local organizations you just heard from. We'll have Yuba Watershed Institute, Sierra Streams Institute, United Auburn Indian Community, and Nevada County OES. There's time built into all these presentations for questions. And at the end, we should have time for more discussion and questions and a brief survey. So I'll jump in with announcements. I'm thrilled to announce that we were awarded additional funding for the Yuba Forest Network. So what would have come to an end this meeting nearly, we get to carry on for a few more months at least, and that'll give me more time to secure more funding for us. We've just done such great work building relationships and trust and going through this process that I'm not ready to have that work come to a halt. So my vision is that this funding will allow us to move our strategy into action. And with that, my next announcement is that our newest strategy draft is available for review. And I'll be sharing that with you all in the meeting notes, but I will also just put it in the chat right now. If you want to save that, bookmark that. If you haven't read it already, I strongly encourage you to. It's an opportunity for us as a collaborative to align ourselves with state efforts and to really set us up for getting funding for collaborative projects. And so I share it with you with the intent of hoping to get your feedback and your insight and your expertise. It's an opportunity to demonstrate your buy-in, include your own objectives and visions for our watershed and our landscape. So there's the draft. And if you do have any comments, you can reach out directly to me. We can set up a time. You can write an email, a memo, however you see fit. But this was an effort of our strategy development subgroup. So you can also join that. We meet once a month, the last Monday of the month, the first, I don't remember. I'll tell you later. But I'm really proud of the work we've done together. So there's that. And then that's it for my announcements. I know we have an announcement from Brandon. with NRCS. So Brandon, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we just wanted to make an announcement. We have our catastrophic fire fund pool is going to be available again this year for our FY22 programs year. And there's an application deadline of December 10th. So if you guys know anybody who would qualify or be interested in, they could contact us to apply by December 10th, and then we're going to have selections around the beginning of January and the end of January. And what that's for is it's for cost share assistance on fire recovery. So it works on non-industrial private forest lands, rangelands, pasture lands, and cropland. So if you know anybody who got burned up in a wildfire, they could apply with us to help replace structural things, fencing, roadways, culverts, tree removal, things like that, erosion control. So yeah, please feel free to contact if you have any questions. I know Mary has my email. I can put my email and phone number in the chat if you'd like, if anybody would like to contact me. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great, thank you. And I'll open it up if anyone else has any announcements they'd like to share with this group. Hearing none, I'm going to pass it on to our first presenter, which is Chris from the Yuba Watershed Institute. And I will let you share your screen. You should have permission now.
Sorry, I needed to unmute myself, and now I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that?
Looks good.
Okay, so I'm Chris Friedel. I'm the executive director of the Yuba Watershed Institute, and I'm going to talk today just sharing about the landscape resilience projects that we have going on in Nevada County. Okay, so who is the Yuba Watershed Institute? Some of you may be familiar with us. We've actually been around for a long time. The organization was founded in 1990, which makes it, I think, the first watershed group in Nevada County, or in the Yuba Watershed. And it's an interesting story. It was founded by a group of neighbors up on the San Juan Ridge who were really concerned about how BLM land was going to be managed in their neighborhoods. These were people who'd come to love the BLM lands in their backyards, and they saw the BLM selling off parcels and doing land swaps, and a lot of those parcels that were getting sold off were just getting clear cut. And the BLM is kind of known for having some good timber because it hasn't had the intense logging history that a lot of the Forest Service lands have had. And so the group actually incorporated as a nonprofit and started a relationship with the local BLM office. And that resulted in the first management plan for what they called the Intimum Forest, which it was kind of groundbreaking at the time. It was one of the first examples of community-led federal forest management in the US. And it was actually quite controversial. There were some county supervisors that were really against the idea at the time, thinking that, why is a small group of unelected officials or unelected citizens get to decide what happens on federal land? It's just funny to me because that's kind of now collaboration with nonprofits and local groups is kind of now the standard model for a lot of federal land management. So that's amusing to me. So our mission is to promote the sustainable use of natural resources and the protection of long-term biodiversity in the Yuba River watershed. So I just wanted to point out that there's use in this mission. So going all the way back to the beginning, these folks wanted these lands to be used. They wanted timber products to come out. They just wanted it to be done in a good way. So our current major programs are, we have landscape resilience, the Inumum Forest. I'm going to talk more about that project. That's an example of one of our projects in that realm. But we also do community education. A lot of you may know us from the fungus foray that used to, before COVID, we did every year, where people got together and went out into the woods and looked for mushrooms and got them identified. It's really fun. We also put out a journal every year, Tree Rings. It's got great artwork and poetry and essays about watershed themes. So I'm just going to zoom in and talk about 3 projects that we're doing: the Inumum Forest Project, Round Mountain Landscape Resilience Project, and the Little Deer Creek Landscape Resilience Project. You can see the Inumum Forest is 12 parcels that are spread kind of loosely around the North Columbia Diggins, the old hydraulic mine up on the San Juan Ridge. And it's about 2,000 acres. Right on the other side of the South Yuba Canyon, we've started to work in the Round Mountain area. I'll talk a little bit about that. That is BLM land, but it also includes about 160 acres of private land. And then the Little Deer Creek project is also a newer project that's in the planning phase. That's a partnership with Sierra Streams Institute. And that's a smaller project. It's BLM land and some private land that's in the Gracie Road Banner Lava Cap area. So what's the Inumum Forest project all about? This is a 35+ year collaboration with the BLM. It started with their Folsom field office, and now we're working with the Motherlode field office. And yeah, over the last 30+ years, we've been really kind of managing this land hand in hand with BLM. BLM has gotten funding to do certain things, and the YWI has been involved with helping implement. And now kind of the tables have shifted, and now there's a lot of money coming from the state, and the Yuba Watershed Institute is helping take this money and help the BLM figure out how to best use it to create resilience in these lands. So we've been successful in recent years with grant funding. The first grant we got was in 2017 from Bella Vista, and that helped us update this management plan that was done in 1995 with some new science. And then we've gotten a series of grants from Sierra Nevada Conservancy. We got a planning grant in 2018, which helped us write the NEPA and CEQA for the project. And then we've gotten 3 implementation grants since then, 1 from CAL FIRE and then 2 from Sierra Nevada Conservancy. And I'll just say that this model of a local partner taking the project from conception through the NEPA planning process and through implementation in collaboration with the federal agency, it's sometimes called the A to Z model. And so we kind of pride ourselves in the fact that we can write NEPA and CEQA in-house. We have staff that can do that. And it's a real plus for the agencies that we work with, that we were able to take a project from start to finish all the way like that. So what are our goals? I listed them here. These are not all the goals, but these are kind of the most pertinent to this group. We want to increase landscape ecosystem resilience to the changes that we're all facing right now. That's the main thing. And how do we do that? Mostly by restoring the historical range of variation is kind of the best proxy that we found for resilience. And that's looking at past forest structure and disturbance regimes and trying to mimic that as best as we can with the tools that we have at hand. And then we have a focus on maintaining water quality and water yield and other ecosystem services. Wildlife habitat. Because we are a watershed group, we can really keep a lens on these other benefits, especially the wildlife habitat benefit. Maybe some other groups who are focused on fuels reduction work are not necessarily able to keep that focus, but yeah. And then that we want to increase the proportion of forest with old forest structure. We recognize there's a lack of large old trees in our Sierra forests. And that's been a focus of the group from the 90s onward, was this focus on preserving and the old growth structure that exists, but also trying to guide the forest more towards an old forest structure. Now, that we know now that the historic forest used to have patches of new forest as well. I mean, whenever you have fire in the system, you're never going to have a static, old growth forest like we think of maybe from the Pacific Northwest. But anyway, we do still have this focus on saving and big old trees and trying to make new ones. We want to introduce fire, promote wildlife habitat connectivity, and reduce fuels and improve fire safety for local communities. So what have we done so far? We've done about 387 acres of treatment so far on the Inamim Forest, and it's a combination of a bunch of different stuff. You'll see in the maps that I'm going to show, it's kind of a mosaic of different treatments in different areas. The cutting and chipping is the most number of acres. That's either with a track chipper out in the woods, or the crews are hauling material to the roads, chipping it into a box truck or a trailer, and then hauling the chips off-site. But we've also done a fair amount of mastication. We've created piles, hand piles, that for later burning in some areas where we can't get equipment. And then we've been dealing with some of the hazard trees and the bug kill trees up on the ridge. I'll talk more about that. And then working with the BLM as part of this project has been able to burn about 9 acres of piles so far. We've covered some more with them. And then we've also done something that I don't know anybody else has done. I'm sure it's been done, but we've been masticating whole logs and to try to get rid of some of the large dead trees that are out there. So I'll talk more about that. So the fire prevention grant from CAL FIRE, we work mostly along the roadways, doing a shaded fuel break on some of the major ingress egress routes on the ridge. But we've also done, a bunch of other treatments in different parts of the project. I'm just gonna kind of go quickly now. For SNC, we've expanded the shaded fuel break along the roads and done some hazard tree removal and other stuff. And then we're still in the middle of this phase 2 grant from SNC, and this is moving off the roadways and trying to treat kind of in a landscape level on forest understory that's tributary to some of the creeks like Shady Creek and Spring Creek. And we have a bunch more work that we're doing this winter that hasn't, this is, the maps I'm showing you is just the treatments that we've already completed. So here's some pictures of people at work. BLM crews burning. We've got the Sacramento Regional Conservation Corps pulling Scotch broom. You can see the track chipper and the hand crews working in the woods. This is before and after of some of the shaded fuel break work that we've done. This is along Tyler Foot Road up on the ridge. You can see how dense some of the fuels are before we do the hand cutting and track chipping. And you can see that the chips are kind of distributed on the forest floor, either broadcast or put into piles. And after a year or two, they kind of disappear. This is also mastication. You can see on the photo on the right, you can see the masticator actually kind of incorporated some of that material down into the soil. That's why you see so much bare soil there. So that that raised a lot of eyebrows, but it's going to be interesting to see how that treatment recovers. And then the log mastication, you can see we took whole logs and just masticated them down into chips, which was a expensive way to get rid of them, but we couldn't figure out how else to do it. I had a video, but I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to play it for you guys. I just want to talk briefly about a couple other projects. The Round Mountain project, like I said, it's mostly BLM, but there is this in-holding of private land that the Bear Yuba Land Trust holds conservation easements on, and we're working with the private landowners and with the BLM right now. We're doing that same kind of NEPA planning process with another grant from SNC at Round Mountain. And then same thing at Little Deer Creek. We're working with SSI over there, and we're also helping take this project through the NEPA process with a planning grant from SNC. And both the Round Mountain project and the Little Deer Creek project will be ready for implementation funding next year. So yeah, I'll just stop there and open it up for any questions.
Thanks, Chris. I have a question. Do you have any, I mean, this is the hardest part for, I think, a lot of organizations, but do you have any funding or plans to conduct monitoring and retreatments of any of those areas?
Yeah, so the monitoring that we do with the grant funding is pretty basic. It's just the photo monitoring. We set up photo points and then do the before and after monitoring. And there's actually a lot that you can get from photo points. I think it's probably the best bang for the buck in terms of monitoring. But we do have plots out there in the forest that were set up by local forest ecologist Joanne Feitz-Kaufman. And we now have baseline data about forest structure and fuel loading from those plots, and some of them are in the areas where we treated. So yeah, we do want to go back and re-measure those plots at certain intervals, but we don't have funding for that in our grants, so we're going to have to do fundraising for that ourselves. But this is a long-term partnership with the BLM, so as far as maintenance goes, you know, we've been working with them in the Inman Forest for 30+ years, and we just keep at it, you know, and that's my best answer as far as maintenance, is that we just have an ongoing commitment to the partnership, and we'll continue to do volunteer days and get grant funding when it's available. And the main goal is to prepare all these areas to be maintained by prescribed fire, which at least theoretically is kind of the lowest cost, best value treatment. So we're working with the BLM right now to try to get their prescribed fire a little bit more functional. And we're hopeful in that department.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions? Oh yeah, Caleb, go ahead.
Yeah, you're all. Great presentation, Chris. It's so impressive what you're doing, and I love all the different scales of it, you know, in little neighborhoods, and then on just the variety of projects you're doing. I guess the question I had, and I came in late, so if you forgive me if you already covered it, but what's the maintenance plan, or what would you hope is the maintenance plan, since we all know brush grows back?
Yeah, sure. So in areas of shaded fuel breaks, sometimes just the heavy loading of masticated or chip material can help reduce the regrowth of the brush, at least for, you know, a certain number of years. I think we know that we have to come back and retreat it like a shaded fuel break, you know, at least every 10 or so years, you're going to need to come back and do a treatment there. But in the areas where there's sun and a lot of potential for regrowth, we really have to, you know, either just come back at a frequent interval with a machine or with handwork, or just make sure that there's a nice deep chip bed there that's going to reduce the resprouting. And then in the more forested areas, at least the the theory with a shaded fuel break is that the shade from the overstory trees will actually reduce the regrowth. So we're trying to grow a nice canopy that's gonna suppress the regrowth of the vegetation there. So hopefully in those more shaded areas, it won't need treatment quite as often. But there are some areas that will lend themselves well to burning, and hopefully if we can get the prescribed fire program up and running with the mother lode, then we can just kind of have these areas, especially the roadside areas, on a regular rotation with the burning. We haven't gotten there yet. We have a ways to go. It's probably would take a lot longer for me to talk about all the ins and outs of the prescribed burning and how that's challenging, but that we're working towards that.
Yeah, so interesting. And then for the projects that were grant funded, did any of them include a maintenance at least once a few years from now, or?
No, I mean, the timeframes of the grants we've gotten so far haven't allowed for maintenance within the time frame, or at least I wasn't creative enough to add it in. I did add that into a recent grant proposal that I did with in collaboration with the county for a different project. We actually did include the first round of follow-up kind of at the end, because I think it's a 5-year grant, so we were able to kind of come back in year 4 or 5 and do a maintenance treatment. So I do think that's something you can do if you have the budget for it and the foresight and to add it in.
You have plenty of foresight already. Thank you.
Chris.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that what Chris was saying about, you know, the time frame for for retreatments is, you know, the problem with our grants is they do have a time frame on them, and we hold retention. So, you know, once the project is done, we need to close it up and be able to pay the retention on it. And, you know, if we could push it out for years for future maintenance, that would obviously, you know, create a number of issues. You know, we're always thinking about, you know, how we might be able to change, you know, the process, but so far we haven't really been able to bridge that issue.
Thank you both. Thank you all so much for those great questions. And thank you, Chris, for presenting. I think I encourage anyone to reach out to him if they have more questions or would like to discuss further, but I want to make sure all of our presenters have time. So next up is Jeff Lauder.
I do have a video. If we
Yeah.
have time at the end of the presentation, I can show the log mastication video.
I think that would be a crowd pleaser.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right, we'll keep it in the back of our minds. Next up, we have Jeff Lauder of Sierra Streams Institute, and he's going to talk to us about all sorts of good work. Jeff, you should be able to share your screen.
All right. Yeah, I was going to add a trivial question I was going to hold until later, and that was how that log mastication went. So I'm curious about that video. Let's see if I can. All right. And share. So, yeah, I'm Jeff Lauder, Executive Director of Sierra Streams Institute. So thank you, Mary, for inviting me to come present on some of this work. For those of you who don't know Sierra Streams Institute, like Chris touched on, we have a couple of partner projects with them and some other groups in the area, but we are a community-based participatory research organization focused on science-based work that really involves community in the entire process. So involving community in everything from question development through data collection, through analysis, interpretation, and share out. We started off primarily in watershed monitoring on Deer Creek watershed and the Bear River watershed. We've since expanded out into other areas, including mine restoration, research on the impacts of human health, impacts of mine waste on human health, and then forest management projects through Sierra Nevada Conservancy on BLM lands, both in partnership with YWI and also some independent projects, and then some riparian restoration work with Bear River Land Trust and Beale Air Force Base, looking at salmon habitat restoration. So pretty broad range of projects, and then all of it's usually connected, which we're going to be talking about today, back through this kind of education lens where we're trying to work on programs that bring people into collecting the data, interpreting it, analyzing it, and developing these formal education programs where people can incorporate real science into kind of everyday decisions. So what I'm going to be talking about today is using current fires as natural experiments to guide regional forest stewardship. And what I mean by natural experiments is basically in any experiment, we usually have to apply a treatment, collect data before the treatment, collect data after the treatment to see what the treatment did. In this case, things like climate change, climate-induced issues, drought, and then obviously things like wildfire are essentially natural experiments where we can learn from some of these increasingly severe wildfires what worked and what didn't in terms of landscape treatments, what drove fire severity, and what can we learn from that, and how can we incorporate that into some of our management. So these two photos here were taken from the two dominant news coverage fires of the year. The left one's from the Dixie, the right one's from the Caldor. And obviously, I think there's some mixed interpretation and mixed news coverage about some of the impacts of these fires. Some of them obviously had some very high severity zones and some loss of structures. But also both of these fires had some areas that burned at very low severities and are really good opportunities to learn what contributed to that, what prior treatments worked and what prior treatments didn't. So all of this is through, so not changing, there we go. Through the lens of, some of the ongoing research into this realm of what drives fire severity and how can we basically use some current research in developing some of our management strategies. And a lot of this work comes from Scott Stevens, Malcolm North, some of those kind of big names in the field. And really, I think it's important to consider this difference in the top left article here from Scott Stevens, this discussion of fuel reduction versus forest restoration. A lot of discussion about how fuel reduction often incorporates a strict focus on ladder fuel reduction as opposed to whole forest structure, whereas there's increasing research showing that really in these higher severity fires, increased resilience comes from heterogeneous or variable structure, meaning clumpiness. So you have clumps, you have gaps, and you have everything in between. You have this kind of natural variability across the landscape. And all of this then feeds into this pyro-silviculture approach that I think many of us already use, but the term is being used a lot this year, where it's kind of a hard sell sometimes to landowners and managers, but those of you who work in basically those of you in this room, I think, obviously take this approach of we're not treating the forest to prevent fire, we're treating it actually to invite low severity fire and to increase resilience to that fire. So we're not going to remove fire from the landscape, we want that fire there. And we can then use these big fires again to learn what works and what doesn't. This year was actually a really interesting example where there were a lot of treatments, in particular up on the Bootleg fire in Oregon, and then a lot in the Caldor and Dixie fire as well. That some data is still being collected on, looking at what kind of treatment was implemented and how did it burn, how did it carry fire, did it slow it down, did it stop it, all those kinds of questions. So this is kind of a refresher I presented this at a prior Yuba Forest Network meeting, but only had a few minutes, so I'm not going to be rushing through as much this time. But basically, we kind of took the same approach to the Jones fire, and now we're doing a similar effort on the River fire of looking at what can we learn from it in terms of what drove severity. So the Jones fire, in terms of fire history, this is looking back about 100 years, missing a couple of fires, but it has most of them in there, is in a landscape that actually hasn't really burned for over 100 years. A portion of it burned in the 1988 49er fire, but most of it has some fire debt built in. And that fire debt is basically coming from this concept of fire return interval that, again, many of you are familiar with. And the fire return interval for these types of forests, built from some tree reconstructions and some other data sets, we think is about 2 to 50 years with a median of 9 to 12 years. So really every 2 years to a decade, these forests and landscapes, historically without some of our built up kind of wild and urban interface areas would be burning. So again, there's this debt built into the system of about 10 to 100 years. So the Jones fire, we used as an opportunity to say, where did it burn at high severity and where did it burn at low severity and what drove that? So this is a map of burn severity derived from satellite imagery. This is called difference normalized burn ratio. So this is reflectance data. It's looking at the wavelength of light reflected back from leaf surfaces, tree surfaces, soil surface. And a ratio basically of those reflectances before versus after the fire, or after versus before, can give us an idea of how severe the fire burned. And really the Jones Fire, and this is an uncorrected severity, so those of you who are familiar with severity know that the scale is a little funky there, but really it's just for comparison's sake. The scale goes up to about 1200. So some spots did burn at pretty high severity, but for the most part, the fire across most of the landscape was a pretty moderate severity fire. I'll show you a better depiction of that in a second here. And really where our interest came from in this, we had a bit of a personal investment and interest in this fire because our office was actually right here in this high severity spot, and it was lost in the fire. So this is what the office looked like after the fire. So we just got back into a new office building, but really it was an interesting opportunity to use this, to examine this weird dichotomy of, we lost our office, we lost a structure. It was, there was a lot of grieving with this process, and there was some very real financial losses associated with this fire. That locally around the building, there could have been some other planning done. But again, at that landscape scale and the ecological sense, the fire was actually a pretty good fire. What I mean by that is if we look at the distribution of severities across this fire perimeter, this is what we get. So most of it's in kind of that low to moderate severity, where if we compare it to something like the Claremont Bear, or what we called the North Complex, which was much larger. So here's the fire outline, here's the Jones down here for size comparison. We see that there's a lot more, obviously, high severity patches within a fire like that. Those of you who have seen some of the areas around like Berry Creek, it's just a moonscape, completely scorched. That's that kind of high severity damage. But really, in terms of historical context, the Jones fire burned about the way that we would expect and kind of want a fire to burn in a landscape like this. So one of the things that we really wanted to pull from this was, okay, what can we kind of quick and dirty pull from some data sets to start informing management of this landscape? And we were looking at basically, can we get data sets that tell us about forest structure that can quickly from the sky give us an idea of where to target treatments in the future by looking at how they affected Jones fire severity. So in this case, we use the same reflectance data to look at just canopy cover. In this case, it's NDVI or leaf cover. And so basically, if it's more red, you have more forested canopy. If it's more blue, it's more open. And this was just a trial. The years are kind of arbitrarily chosen, but we were looking at, can we use change in canopy cover to maybe detect where treatments were applied, and then combine this with even surveys of landowners to ask them where they treated and map those out, to then get a map of, hey, where did we have a change in canopy cover before the fire where a treatment was applied? Then we can take that same canopy cover data and get this structural heterogeneity variable, which is how clumpy is that landscape. So we zoom into individual pixels, which in this case are only about 10 meters wide, and then we compare every single pixel to every pixel around it. So if it has a higher heterogeneity value, it basically means it's more disconnected. The forest canopy is more disconnected than if it's blue. If it's blue, it means it's kind of a continuous surface of canopy. It's not looking at ladder fuels, and we'll get back to that, but just in terms of continuity of that surface. And then we plug all of those into just a quick little model of which of these variables best predicted resulting fire severity. And this was done from a preliminary standpoint. We didn't incorporate things like topography, wind, and other things that obviously drive fire. This was a wind-driven event with kind of this north wind pushing up the canyon. But just looking again at, did structural heterogeneity influence burn severity like we expected to? And really what we found was, yes, structural heterogeneity drove burn severity to the tune of about 12.5% of the variation in burn severity. And it was inversely correlated, meaning increasing structural heterogeneity or increasing clumpiness, we had decreasing severity and vice versa. And then also just total canopy coverage in general, how dense and connected that canopy was, we had higher burn severity. So all that's pretty intuitive, but it was just a kind of a data process to say, can we draw from this data, see if this actually applied to this fire in terms of severity, and then apply that to management. So the next steps is we are doing the same process on the river fire burn scar right now, but then also lumping in this data into a couple other regional projects. The Wildlife Conservation Board funded Sierra Foothill Forest Climate Resilience Project, and the National Science Foundation funded Our Forests Project. And what these projects are, they're kind of linked up. The Sierra Foothill Forest Project is actually in the Jones Bar Firewise community. And the irony here was we actually got awarded the grant right before the fire happened. Then the fire happened, and then now we're actually working on forest management in unburned areas as well as post-fire recovery in burned areas. And the approach here is not so much to take your standard forest management approach, where we come in and basically tell the participants, do the permitting, do the implementation, we're actually taking, again, this all hands on deck community driven approach where we've been having community meetings with the Jones Bar Fire West community, sharing what we learned from the Jones Fire, sharing all of our data sets, and basically having these data-driven planning meetings where the community members can say, oh, I wanted to put a fuel break here. And we can say, here's what that would look like in the data. Here's what a fire model might show if you put that fuel break there, and just guide their decision as opposed to telling them what to do. And that is going to result in permitting being completed for implementation. And then this community toolkit where all the members of this community know where to go to get some of this forest data to help them drive management of their lands. And this is leveraging some of the data that we collected by basically, we can then now zoom in on people's individual parcels and say, oh, we're going to put a fuel break here. Oh, would that actually work relative to, in this case, structural heterogeneity and then resulting burn severity. So we're putting this data in the hands of the community, which is really exciting. That project is just getting up and rolling. And then the paired project with it is the Our Forest project. We're working with the UC Davis Center for Community and Citizen Science and Nevada County Superintendent of Schools, where we're developing curriculum for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students and teachers to basically teach them about what forest health means, what are each of the components of forest health, how do we measure them using real forest tools, and then actually send them out into the field to collect real forest data that then feeds back into management plans. So this is all under this idea of youth-focused community and citizen science, which really is focused on the key thing here is trying to work with these students to have them do real science as opposed to just learning about it. So we're equipping them with tools that are consistent with what are called the next generation science standards, and then working with them to share that data with actual outside practitioners of each of these fields. So we're, for example, working with them as forest ecologists to say, hey, we're going to have regular check-ins with you, the students, to talk about what you saw in the landscape and what that might mean for me in terms of how that might help my decision in terms of management. And then basically, like I said, linking up with the community to actually share those experiences, give little presentations to the community to say, here's what we found and here's what we think about forest health based on what we studied. And, oh no, slide went missing. Basically, the cycle of this project is to work with students to develop testable questions about forest health, collect, evaluate, and document that data, generate some meaning from that data, and then share it with community partners such as forest ecologists, forest managers, landowners, land managers, and then work with them to develop next steps and questions that the students can then continue to answer year after year. And then the way this is set up is students first learn about forest health in the classroom, and then they go out into what we call forest investigation zones. So these forest investigation zones are actually pre-established with schools, typically on their property. And that's the really exciting part about this is, for example, Woolman School and Nevada City School of the Arts, which are in this Wildlife Conservation Board Forest Management Grant Program, are forest investigation zones. So students go out, collect data, learn about the environment, do some outdoor fun activities just as 3rd through 5th graders would like to do, and then come back and learn about what that data means. And then that data feeds back into this larger forest management plan. So instead of us going out and collecting data, these students are learning about forest health while then collecting the data that actually guides the plan. So we're really excited about this kind of work. We're hoping to continue to expand out this curriculum and this data sharing process. And then also from the spatial data perspective, just wanted to say this is something where we're trying to get the code and the workflow entirely automated so that that kind of data can be readily accessible to anyone who wants it. So if you're interested in that, that's something I'm still working toward, to say, hey, you have a quick question about burn severity and structure, click go, it'll spit it out for you. I'm not there yet, but that's a goal. So any questions about how all of those are related?
Hi, Jeff. I don't have a question. It's more of just a statement. I think that this model is completely brilliant and would love to talk offline with you. We are working on a big grant, and we want to include a component on education and art and science and how we might be able to combine those all together. So I'd really love to, chat with you about that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That really is just what we keep running into is still that, I think, disconnect between people who are collecting the data, doing the science, and doing the management. And then while the community, you know, we seem to all be on the same page, sometimes we're actually not as much as we think we are. And I think there's a really good model, actually, that the Truckee Museum exhibit that just opened up, I think, is a great example of that kind of approach. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm connecting with them on Monday. So, I mean, if we can like pull in all these different partners and bring that to Western Nevada County, that's like the vision. And one thing that really resonated with me that you said last time we met was, you know, for this funding, we don't need to be competing, but we can be playing to our strengths and our areas of expertise. And that's what I really find valuable about this network, is that we can identify those opportunities. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And yeah, great presentation, Jeff. Thank you so much. I want to make sure our other speakers have time. So Sherilyn, if I'll get you set up here, but if anyone has more questions for Jeff, like by all means, continue the conversation in the chat or offline. Okay. Ooh. Sorry. Okay. And can everyone see that presentation? Looks good. Does that look correct, Sherilyn?
Yep,
All
that
right.
looks good. And can you all hear me okay? Okay, perfect. So hi, everybody. I'm Sherilyn. I'm a cultural regulatory coordinator with the Tribal Historic Preservation Department at the United Auburn Indian Community. I'm not a tribal member. I'm a staff person. And I have worked in the department for about 5 years. And then I'm going to be co-presenting today with Matthew Moore, who can go ahead and introduce himself.
Hello, Matthew Moore. I'm the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer with United Auburn Indian Community. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Mary, could you take us to the next slide? We're going to start off, and Matt is going to introduce the United Auburn Indian Community. So take it away, Matt.
Thank you. So United Auburn Indian Community, located in Placer County, is a tribe made up of Nisenan Maidu, which is Southern Maidu, and Miwok, just outside of Auburn, California. They're comprised of approximately 300 adult members. We recently, on one of our recently acquired properties, built a new tribal school. We've had a school in the past, but we just kind of outgrew it. And so they decided to go ahead and build a new one, which is exciting. This year is the first year they are there. And in the future, we plan on putting in a cultural center as well, which is in the plans as we speak. We do have some tribal lands, some of it's fee, some of it's trust, but we are currently really heavily involved in a lot of projects involving our properties for fuel reduction and restorative projects. A lot of things involving native plants, possible nursery, a lot of educational opportunities here for tribal members. Cheryl?
Cool, thanks, Matt. Mary, next one, perfect. So where is United Auburn Indian Community? As Matt said, the tribal offices and the primary reservation lands are just outside of Auburn, California, but the tribe's geographic area of traditional and cultural affiliation extends all over. So it crosses 11 counties, 2 national forests. We work with 20 plus federal agencies, 15 plus state agencies, 21 cities and towns, and then 25 utility districts. So we keep pretty busy, and that's just the Tribal Historic Preservation Department. So the Preservation Department is just one branch or department within the tribal government. So could you take us to the next one, Mary? Cool, thank you. So here on the right is just a kind of structure of the way that United Auburn's Preservation Department is set up. So we answer to, or the preservation rather, works under Tribal Council. We work in collaboration with the Tribal Historic Preservation Committee and Matt, who is the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, and he is an appointed position. And then within the department, the department's overseen by the director, who's Rebecca Allen, who is here with us today. And then it's kind of set up into 3 different divisions where we all tackle different aspects of preservation and cultural and land stewardship. So we'll get into that in a little bit. A couple things to know is that this is just UAAC's structure. Every tribe is structured differently. They have different priorities. They approach land stewardship and preservation in different ways. Then tribes are also limited by their internal and external capacities. So United Auburn is a pretty high capacity tribe compared to many others. I think we have, should have counted first, but 10 or 12 staff in the preservation department, which is a lot more than other folks have. So that capacity helps us do a lot, but we're also kind of at capacity a lot of times because we have a large area and are working a number of different on a number of different projects. So another thing to keep in mind when working with UAC is that it is a sovereign government. And it has its own bureaucratic process. So sometimes things move slowly, and that is definitely something to keep in mind as we're working with collaborators and working on projects. There are some things that need to go through this channel that you can see on the right before they can have action taken on them. So the last thing to know is that UAC doesn't apply for or accept grant funding. So all of their programs are self-funded, but we'll talk about that as an area of opportunity to possibly collaborate a little bit later on in the presentation. Go next, please. Okay, so what does tribal historic preservation do? On the left, you can kind of see our approach to this. So we start with prevention, and this is prevention of impacts to tribal cultural resources. And I'll use that word probably a lot. And when we talk about tribal cultural resources, this could be material items, like what you see here, this mortar bowl. It could be sites, so archaeological sites. It could be landscapes. It could also be watersheds and waterways. It could also be native plants. So tribal cultural resources cover a broad range of different materials, and the tribe has specific ways that they like to respond to and treat each of these. So our first go-to is prevention of impacts to these to tribal cultural resources. And then the next step would be to preserve tribal cultural resources. The next would, or what if we can prevent impacts and we can preserve them, then we can work towards restoring them. And restoration can look different in a lot of ways. I think that we all can kind of picture what that might look like on the landscape, but that could also be restoring items to the tribe from museum collections or something like that. Or it could also be restoring items taken from the earth back to the earth. And through these processes, then we're restoring cultural places. When we can restore places, then we can also educate people we're partnering with, tribal members and the public, on the importance of tribal cultural resources and their role across the landscape. And then that education also plays into the future of prevention of impacts to tribal cultural resources. So from here, we can talk about what that looks like a little bit, but Matt, before we go on, is there anything you want to add?
No, just briefly, I think when we look at resources, I mean, today in this world, we talk about resources all the time, but what it boils down to, we see all resources as cultural, and that's kind of how we treat it. And, you know, everything, you know, from the land to taking from it and giving back, everything goes full circle and it's all connected. So, you know, we kind of approach it that way.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. Next, please. All right, so on this slide, then we're trying to capture that interconnection that Matt mentioned. So how do we actually work with preservation? So one step of this is cultural stewardship. And this looks like consulting with projects. So I know in a couple other presentations, we mentioned NEPA and CEQA, and there's obligations to consult with tribes under that. And United Auburn really sees that as a way to educate partners on the importance of tribal cultural resources, again, their role in the landscape, and then also to go back to that prevention of impacts, that preservation, restoration, and education. Sometimes that does look like tribal monitoring on project specific, well, on specific projects, I guess. And that is one method of both prevention of impacts and restoring objects that could possibly be damaged or might be removed from certain projects. So next. Perfect. So within this approach is also site stewardship and restoration. So this is also, again, prevention, avoidance, education, and consultation. On the left, there's a picture of a site that was in the Kingfire area. We took the scenario out on a site visit with the El Dorado National Forest. And when we were talking about prevention of impacts to sites, like from wildfires or something like this, then often sites like this are highly overgrown. And so when a fire goes through, they can actually have a lot of impacts to the sites. So we definitely want to avoid that. And that takes education and consultation on working with different landowners to treat sites so that we're actually avoiding these and then are avoiding impacts. And then we're working with the El Dorado National Forest to look at how to restore these sites and restore them with native plants and effectively for the tribes to steward these places. Next one, Mary. So this brings us to land stewardship and restoration. So the tribe is approaching this on their own tribal lands that Matt mentioned, but are also working through consultation and with partners to manage and steward lands off of basically on lands that are under other ownership. So for UIC, this is, or we're prioritizing native plant restoration or prioritizing prescribed and cultural burns. We're really focusing in on the health of the waterways and then focusing in on agency and intertribal collaboration so that we can all work a little bit better together. Matt, I'm wondering if there's anything on here that you want to speak more to, and then if you would also be willing to talk about the difference between prescribed burns and cultural burns.
Yeah, sure. I'll just start with that. Yeah, as we know, prescribed burns are, there's a lot of a lot of overhead involved sometimes, a lot of red tape, a lot of restrictions. Which, really kind of culturally speaking, it really kind of ties your hands behind your back a lot of times. So, I mean, that's kind of a one issue that we deal with. And when we talk about cultural burns, it's we're really looking at trying to relax some of the regulations, I guess, with some of the agencies to allow more flexibility. Cultural burns are typically, it's not a prescription. We're not looking at a burn window. It's more of an organic approach. We typically will not use too much things like drip torches or what they call fusees, which are like flares. Oftentimes they leave some of the material burned from it behind, and which is a chemical. So we try to avoid things like that, mechanical or anything mechanical. It's more of a utilizing what we have there to say, make your own torch out of the vegetation that you find there, and using natural fire breaks, creeks, trails, game trails, rock outcroppings, greenways or green belts, and performing our burns more targeted. It's oftentimes they're just going to go target the black oaks and go burn under the black oaks to help, with the pests. It helps produce the acorn production, and also reducing fuels. Looking at cultural burns and looking back, we didn't have a fuel issue. There was never a heavy fuel load. As like was mentioned previously, things were really dispersed, and the native plant community in a whole is very fire adaptive. So it needed fire to stay healthy. And we of course we look at it as, and it's returning back to the soil, carbon sequestration to help clean our waterways. So it helps water quality. But our resources, whether it's food, medicine, materials we use for structures like our roundhouses, our bark houses, our granaries, all come from the land, and we need those healthier plant communities that are usable and not unhealthy. Say like basketry material is very important that they burn that off, and then the new shoots are what they target. It's not that the plant itself, a mature plant, is what they really could use, even though they were there. They modified things to their particular uses. So it really, the cultural burning thing, I mean, that's where it starts and where it ends for, the ecosystem, and how, we try to keep it healthy. Because, we relied on it. That was our supermarket. It was our hardware store. It was, everything in between. So in order to take from it, you have to give back. And that's the whole concept of land stewardship. And it's for cultural people, it's a very spiritual thing too, and a healing process in a way.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, I think that really captures what we're trying to represent here also, is that cultural stewardship and land stewardship cannot be disconnected from the tribe's perspective. They are one and the same. So if we can go to the next slide, then we wanted to just talk about some of the projects that we have going on, so we can get kind of some like practical ideas on what this actually looks like. So some native plant propagation projects that are in progress or ongoing. We're working with the El Dorado National Forest to do seed collection and site stabilization. So this is going on for the King Fire, and we're looking at doing this for the Caldor Fire. Again, we're focusing on the tribal cultural resource sites as a starting point, and are looking to collect from native plants, prioritize those plants, and then revegetate some sites so that they are better protected from erosion and things like that. We're working with the American River Conservancy on the Wakamatsu farm and their native plant nursery, and then are also native plant nursery. And then we're looking at doing some prescribed burns over there possibly. And then as mentioned earlier, then DOAC is working on their own tribal lands, and are also looking to possibly establish a native plant nursery in Placer County. Anything to add there, Matt?
No, I think you hit it.
All right, perfect. Next, please. All right, so for cultural and prescribed burning, this is a little more complex. So for our own tribal lands management, then we're, as Matt mentioned, looking at doing fuels reduction and preparing these properties so that they are fire ready. We've been working, as some of the other folks in this group have, with the Placer Resource Conservation District on their white paper for barriers to prescribed burn on private land, and we'll be participating in some of the projects that they have coming up to identify those barriers. And I think that Matt will be speaking about cultural burns at one of their upcoming meetings. We are just starting a partnership with UC Berkeley at their Blodgett Research Forest, which is just outside of Georgetown. And then they also recently acquired Grouse Ridge, which is up in, I think it's in Nevada County still, it might be on the Placer side, but so they are they're already doing prescribed burning on their lands, and we've been talking with them about how to incorporate the cultural burning aspects that Matt went over into their prescribed burns, so we can get multi-benefits out of these projects, and they can work with the tribe to better steward the cultural resources that are on their properties. And then we have in the past and continue to build intertribal partnerships among tribes across the Sierra Nevada and across the state. So we've hosted several workshops and conferences where we brought multiple tribes together and talked about their barriers in prescribed burn and the way that they are working with their partners and agencies to return fire to the land. And then we also have in the past participated in some of the TREX programs. So Matt could possibly speak to that a little bit more. And then we also have a couple of challenges and opportunities on the right, but I think that we can talk about those on the next slide a little bit more. Matt, do you have anything to add to this one?
I do not believe so.
Perfect. So here's some of the opportunities for partnerships where we have. So as far as grant partnerships, as I mentioned earlier, then United Auburn does not receive grants, but we are in a place where we are, the Preservation Department is willing and open to looking at partnering with other nonprofit or non-governmental organizations that can receive grants so we can collaborate better on projects. There are some grants that are specific to or directed towards tribes and some funding sources available there. And so we're looking at ways that we could possibly access some of that funding and work again through a partnership to be a little bit proactive on some projects where we might have mutual interest. So that's something that we're definitely interested in talking about more. And then Matt, if you want to cover the last two, then go for it.
Sure. Yeah, so for tribal monitor red cards, I think not just our tribe, every tribe across the country has been dealing with the same problem. And getting our tribal people the certifications needed to be on a fire line, which is typically called the red card, which is usually a week-long course that you take, and then there's a lot of depending on if you're with an agency, a sponsoring agency, they may require certain things, which in our world for a tribe, as a tribal government, we really take our tribal sovereignty pretty serious. And anytime we go through a process and it's heavily I don't know, more of a heavily regulated, I guess, oftentimes they want to put you through all the extra steps just to get a certification to do the same thing as just to be qualified to be out on the, say, a fire line to do more preventative work, such as a resource advisor position on a fire on a forest. These people are out there protecting resources. And in our case, we like to have our people out there with those same qualifications protecting our prehistoric sites. And as we know, on fires these days are so catastrophic. All the individuals out there are just so overwhelmed with the workload that they have ahead of them, because the El Dorado, for instance, there was just so many prehistoric sites that were affected, and they just didn't have enough people to really get ahead of the say the bulldozers and the hand lines to really protect them well. A lot of these sites can end up getting hit with air tankers and maybe clipped with bulldozers, or some of our site boundaries are affected. But you know, if we had the right people out there on the line, we would be able to protect these areas. So in just that qualification process is just, you know, really kind of non-tribal friendly, I guess. And it's hard for a tribe to do it on their own because you're not a fire agency, and it really creates a lot of complications and confusion for tribes and agencies. I think a lot of agencies want to see that happen, but they're in the same boat, you know. So we're working really hard with, say, the El Dorado to come up with a course just for, you know, tribal people, say like our tribal monitors. We want to get them red cards so that they can assist in those kind of scenarios.
Excuse me, Matt, I hate to interrupt you. I'm so sorry, but we are running out of time and I want to make sure Jen can present.
Okay.
Yes, and I apologize from the bottom of my heart, but if you have any concluding thoughts,
It's okay.
Otherwise, please continue the conversation offline or in the chat as well, especially if anyone has any questions.
I think, Mary, could you just advance to the last one? And then I just put my email in there. And then I can put it in the chat as well. So
thank you so much. This is my bad.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Oh, you bet. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, Jen. I will share my screen again.
Thank you, Mary. Is it currently up? I'm not seeing it right now.
It should be up.
Looks like it's.
Can you not see it still?
It looks like it's trying to share, but I'm not seeing it. I don't know if anyone else sees it yet.
How about now? No?
I can't see it.
Oh boy.
No, just that it says it's trying to share.
How about now?
Still not working, but I can.
How about now?
No, but I can wing it. Oh, there we go.
Okay, great. Apologies.
Great. Thank you. Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, Mary. As I said before, my name's Jen Tamo, and I work as an analyst in the Office of Emergency Services, and we're really grateful to have this opportunity to present to you all this morning and really to get a better understanding of the work that you all are doing. I'm really inspired, and I'll definitely be following up with each of you offline. So one of the things that we really want to make sure, there we go, perfect, Mary. Yeah, if we could be on slide 2, that would be great. So I just wanted to let you all know a little bit more about the Office of Emergency Services, you know, what the work that we're doing to build climate resiliency here in Nevada County, and invite you to participate in some of the planning efforts that we have upcoming here in early 2022, and then also share some grant opportunities that we think you might be interested in. So a little bit about who we are. We're responsible for emergency management at the county level, and we work with both municipalities and the state and federal government. And at any given time of year, we live within one of these 4 realms. We work on mitigation, so you know, preventing catastrophic wildfire or other natural hazards. We focus a lot on community preparedness, but also really working on developing emergency plans. We respond to emergencies. So when we have wildfires, we're supporting the sheriff's office with evacuations, with public messaging and sheltering. And we also focus on recovery from large major disasters like wildfires. Next slide, please. Currently, within the mitigation realm, we are advancing contracts. We recently secured a grant to do a shaded fuel break along egress routes in Alta Sierra. So we're partnering with the Fire Safe Council and CAL FIRE to create a 100-foot shaded fuel break along Buck Mountain Road, Lodestar, and Brewer Roads in Alta Sierra, and we'll be starting that here in early 2022. Next slide. We are also, when you get a chance, Mary, if we could advance to the next slide. Oh, perfect, thank you. We also just received a couple grants from FEMA. These are hazard mitigation grants, and we are going to be supporting residents in the county who may be low income or don't have the physical ability to implement this defensible space themselves. So we're going to be assisting almost 1,000 residents receive defensible space. This is going to be, these projects are phased. So we're doing some implementation in phase 1, but most of what we're going to be doing is reaching out to folks who are interested in participating in the programming and qualifying eligible residents. Next slide. So even though fire season, we're out of fire season, thankfully, we do not stop responding. We maintain a state of readiness. And for example, just a couple of weeks ago, the National Weather Service issued a debris flow warning for the river fire burn scar. And so we are still responding to natural disasters as they come up. Next slide. Oh, and we are also working on recovery. As Paul can attest, he is fully immersed in river fire recovery. Next slide, please. And this is an effort that takes months and months. It can last about a year in some cases. And so we are also working on recovery. But today I'd like to focus on both mitigation and planning and invite you all to think about how we might be able to partner on these first 2 areas of focus. So 2020, the fire season far surpassed any records on the books. I don't think I need to tell you all that 5 of California's 6 largest wildfires in modern history burned at the same time. We had mass evacuations and terrible air quality. So we're all living through the impacts of climate change now. And we really have an opportunity to coordinate and collaborate to increase the scale of our restoration and resiliency work. So help is on the way for on-the-ground work. The state and federal legislatures are allocating unprecedented amounts of funding to address these issues. So we are looking to really coordinate across the county and the region to really align our shared vision and to figure out how we might be able to work more effectively together. Next slide, please. So we have applied for funding to update 2 major plans. These are our local hazard mitigation plan and our community wildfire protection plan. And this is really an opportunity for us to bring together a whole host of different stakeholders who are all working on wildfire mitigation in Nevada County and really make sure that your priorities and your strategies get baked into these plans. And when we do include your priorities and your projects, it makes our applications for these state and federal funds so much more competitive, and we can really start to implement the work that we'd like to see in Nevada County. Next slide. So first off, state funding. The state has allocated $1.5 billion in a recent wildfire package. This is over the next 2 years, and $2 billion for climate resiliency. So we really have an opportunity to coordinate and to pursue that funding. And in terms of federal funding, on the next slide, you'll see there is a lot of funding coming down the pike as well. Last year, the federal government started the Building Resilient and Infrastructure in Communities project, the BRIC grant. They allocated $500 million last year. They doubled it in 2021. In the summer, the federal government announced that Sonoma County had received $37 million for this wildfire mitigation work. And this is just an example of some of the entities and organizations that are drawing down these funds. And we have that opportunity in Nevada County as well. We are going to be pursuing a BRIC grant. It's due in December. So I definitely would love to talk to you all about opportunities for us to partner on that grant. And like we had said earlier with Jeff, we really want to build in community awareness and education at all levels. So community training, but also reaching our youth too. Just an aside for these 2 programs, we are required for a 25 to 30% match. So we're hoping to draw down state funds as that match. An important aside is that burning is not yet an eligible expense for the federal government. So if the network is interested in helping us advocate for it to be an eligible expense, I would welcome that opportunity as well. We probably need to reach out to Cal OES and FEMA to get that policy changed. Next slide. To help us coordinate our mitigation efforts, since OES does get pulled off on response and recovery, we applied for a grant to help fund a staff member who can really focus on county wildfire mitigation and to be able to participate in meetings such as this and really have a pulse on what is happening throughout the county and how we can align our efforts. So we're really excited. We just found out yesterday that that grant was funded. And so we'll be hiring someone. If you think that you know anybody who would be a good fit for this position, please do let us know. We'll be hoping to launch the job application here in the coming weeks. So keep an eye out for that. And next slide. I know I'm speaking fast and we're running out of time, but I just want to invite you all to keep an eye out for those invitations to participate in those two plans. We really want to make sure that we're working in alignment with the Yuba Forest Network. And I know you guys have spent a lot of time putting together your forest resiliency plan and basing or including the pillars of resilience from TCSI's framework. We want to make sure that we're doing that too. So please keep an eye out and do join us. We want to make sure that there are a variety of perspectives represented in these plans and that they're really relevant for our community. And I just wanted to let you know, I had shared a spreadsheet from the Sierra Business Council with Mary, and she is going to help share that after this meeting. It's got a breakdown of all the federal funding that's focused on wildfire and climate resiliency, so you can take a peek at some of that funding that is going to be coming available very soon. And I will wrap it up there, and I'm open to any questions if anybody has any. Awesome.
Jen, thank you so much. That was really impressive, not only just how quickly you were able to convey so much information, but the content itself. So thank you so much for being here today and sharing that. And I will share that spreadsheet that you mentioned. So I'll share that with the meeting notes, as well as, you know, I link a bunch of stuff. Apologies for all the emails, but it is important information. So thank you all for sticking around for a few extra minutes. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday, and I'm also here for a few extra minutes as well if anyone has any follow-up questions or requests. But thank you so much. And thank you to all the presenters.
I was just going to jump in and say, yeah, Jen, I think we already talked about this, but thank you so much for the approach that you guys are taking now. I know in the past, there's been, you know, somewhat of a disconnect from the community and the actual CWPP and kind of those discussions. So I really like the approach you guys are taking now and integrating the whole community into that process. So.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and we will be leaning on all of you to help spread the word that and to invite your networks too. So thank you.
For whoever is ready. Yeah, okay.
I think we're ready.